Hello and welcome to the Statesmanship Project, episode 20. 4 weeks in, doing pretty well, I think. My progress through easy strength, I think, is going well. I don't know if I am pushing myself a little too hard or not, or if I have just hit a good working stride here and everything else was just super light at the beginning, but I've kind of leveled off with 253s on the front squat and 153 on the overhead press. It seems to be going pretty well. Chin-ups still doing body weight, but I'm doing 8 regularly. Dips, I added 10 pounds to my body weight, so I'm doing 8 of those. That's pretty good. And the swings take me forever. It's 5 sets of 15 with the 70. It's not really forever, just in relative comparison to everything else. And then when you have a cat that likes to rub on your legs while you're doing swings, it makes it very difficult. So you'll see that probably. Boots will make an appearance in this video, I am sure. Otherwise, it's going pretty well. What I want to discuss in this particular video is another delve into variable interplay with the equation for program success. And specifically this time, let's say you are someone like me who really enjoys just absolutely killing yourself in the gym. And this is why easy strength has been so good for me, because I am not killing myself at all. I probably still go harder than I should, but not as hard as I used to. But I digress. So let's say, for the last year, up until I started easy strength, I was doing Mentor style high intensity training. And it's fun to do. Personally, I really enjoy it because you get to push yourself as hard as you absolutely can in the gym every time. And CrossFit's like this in a lot of ways too, just different programming. But the intensity factor is very, very high. And I really enjoy it. Now with what I was doing, I made sure that I had enough rest. I took 4 days between training sessions. So I do the same. It was 4 days. So when I did a training session, I would have 16 days until I did it again, because I had 4 separate sessions that I worked through, because it broke up the body into 4 different groups. Muscle groups. So let's get into this. Intensity is at its top, utmost maximum. So that means my other 2 numerator variables, frequency and duration, must be low. So my frequency was naturally low. 3 full days of rest between training sessions. And then sometimes more if it was necessary. And then duration was 1 set, no more than, I think I did at the most was 10 exercises a session, and that was at the absolute most. Most of the time it was like 7 or 8 exercises in the session, and it was just 1 set per exercise. And of course, like I said, the intensity was very high, so every set was going to absolute gut-busting failure whenever possible. And then, so divided by rest. So I gave myself 3 full days of recovery and then adaptation. And during this, I went from about 168 to about 193, 194, something like that. So it definitely had a muscle building effect, but I will say it wasn't all muscle that I put on. And I have pictures, so you'll be able to see. It doesn't look like there's much of a difference, but I think a lot of the weight went into my legs. I digress. With this style of training, it's possible to make progress. Again, my goal was hypertrophy. I wanted to gain as much muscle mass as I could. And of course, with 3 days off, you have plenty of time to focus on other things. You could really dial in your diet. I wasn't super focused on my diet. And then, I just wanted to make sure I was eating enough extra food to facilitate the removal process for tissue growth. And then adaptation. I think this is where there's a bit of a falling off with something like Mentor style high intensity training. And that is adaptation. Now, when you go to failure, your form inevitably breaks down. If you're on a machine doing an isolation exercise, it's not that big of a deal. But if you're doing something like a heavy barbell back squat, your form breaks down, you can either get injured very easily, or just generally lose progress because of technical breakdown, like your form breaks down. So you can't do as much weight because your form is not as good. And then as form breaks down, you can't progress weight. And then you maybe even have to go lighter so that you get proper form back. So on machines, it's a lot easier to go to failure. With compound movements, I don't advise it. Just from my own personal experience. Moving forward, I'll have to keep that in mind. As far as doing something like easy strength, I think my form has improved on everything that I'm doing because I am reconditioning that movement pattern every single day. Nice, smooth, and easy. Not challenging it too much at all. And this is what we have to understand. Adaptation is it's probably one of the most important variables, probably second to recovery. It's part of rest, because otherwise you're never going to adapt to your training. But if you're not doing anything that's facilitating adaptation, then you're not going to make any progress. So this is the problem with something like Mentor style high intensity training or Nautilus style high intensity training. There is the possibility that, when you're doing something on a machine, you can adapt to that pretty easily. The range of motion is pretty straightforward, but when you're using free weights, it's much, much harder to program your body because there's so much more going on. And this is something to keep in mind if you're doing something like CrossFit style training. Are they giving you enough programming time to master the movement without pushing your body to any level of extreme fatigue or stress? Something to consider with all programs. And so with something like CrossFit, you're typically like 3 days on, 1 day off, 2 days on, 1 day off, something like that. And so are you giving yourself enough time to rest and recover from what you did? Because the intensity is so high. So we have to make sure that we are factoring all of these in, because at very high intensity, it can be very hard to recover and adapt to the training, because you need so much time. You need to have such a low frequency that adaptation, such a low frequency and such a brief duration, that adaptation to the form of the movement doesn't necessarily occur. Or as well as it would, how would you be doing much lower intensity at a much higher frequency? This is what I'm learning and discovering right now with easy strength. And I think it's definitely what my body needed. My form is improving on everything, and I'm really able to dial in proper form on everything I'm doing. And for long-term health and longevity, we want to make sure that we are dialed in with our form on everything we're doing. Otherwise, we are likely to have an injury, and that'll be a huge drain on your training, because instead of training, you'll just be in pain and recovering. So keep that in mind as you're training. Take it from my personal experience. Injuries suck. And I hope that this further discussion on the interplay between the variables and the equation for program success has been helpful. Thank you for tuning in, and until next time, have a good day.